They say that everybody knows somebody with cancer. Well, not me. I know hundreds of people. And that's because I'm a breast surgeon. They're my patients. And I find it really easy to talk to them about cancer. But when it's someone close to me, that's completely different. I never know what to say. What would you say to your best friend if they told you they had cancer? How do you help them? I thought I knew what it was like to have cancer. After all, I'd been treating it for years. But I was wrong. And I realized this a year ago when a patient told me what it was really like. She told me how she coped. She told me how to help her cope. And it all started with this tweet. That's right. That patient was me. I found it very, very hard to accept my diagnosis of breast cancer. I was in denial. It couldn't be real. And this was me the night before I found out. That woman couldn't have breast cancer, could she? She was young, fit, and healthy. And yet it was real. And somehow, I had to learn to accept it. Now, I wasn't being treated in my own breast unit, but in a local hospital where I've worked for several years as a junior doctor and where my husband also works as a surgeon. Everybody knew us. They asked me if I wanted to use a false name, and this is often done when members of staff become patients, and it's to protect our confidentiality. But in that surreal moment of finding out that A, I had breast cancer, and B, I'd be starting chemotherapy within a week, the only thing that came into my head was to use my porn star name. Now, I'm not really a porn star in my spare time, but anybody can have a name. And this is how you work yours out. It's the name of your first pet and your mother's maiden name. Now, mine is Max Love. I'm quite proud of that. But I couldn't imagine a nurse calling that out in a busy waiting room, and there's no way I'd remember it once chemotherapy took hold. Also, I was bound to get recognized walking around the hospital. People would see me. And once I lost my hair, it would be obvious I was having chemotherapy. There didn't seem any point in changing my name. Later that night, I got home, and when my husband and I had stopped swearing at each other and stopped crying, I took out my phone and I looked at Twitter. And I sat there staring blankly at the screen. I didn't know what to do. Do I tell Twitter I have breast cancer? Now, I tweet a lot. It's part of my life. And at that time, I mainly tweeted about triathlons and baking. By doing all the sport, I get to eat all the cake. But could I really go 9 months without talking about cancer? Because that's how long my treatment took. People would recognize me. They were going to talk about me. The gossip would be inevitable. And so I thought, why not beat them to it? Take control and tell everybody first. Cancer isn't a dirty secret. I didn't want to hide it. I wasn't ashamed. Shit happens, and this is how I would deal with it. But I was scared. There'd be no going back. I'd have to accept the consequences, good and bad. I'd also have to persuade my husband, because my decision would affect us both. But he agreed with me. And the next morning, we both pressed the send button at the same time. And I can honestly say that the day I told Twitter I had breast cancer was one of the best days of my life. Within minutes, my timeline was flooded with messages of sympathy, sorrow, and support from people all over the world, most of whom were complete strangers. And within a couple of weeks, I'd formed my own secret tribe. This was a group of doctors with cancer, most of whom had kept it hidden, but they'd found the courage to tell me. They were amazing. Now, you don't get much sleep during chemo, and we'd all lie awake in the middle of the night, secretly texting away. I'd hide under the covers so my husband wouldn't know I was awake. I'm sure he thought I was having an affair. We were able to tell each other things that were too painful to tell our loved ones. Here's an example. A friend of mine told me he was really happy the day his cancer came back. It meant he could stop waiting for it to happen and start dealing with it. His wife didn't understand, but we all did. As you can see, cancer is hard. It messes with your head. But it's even harder when you're a breast surgeon with breast cancer. I suddenly realized all these things I could do so much better when looking after patients. In the past, when I used to break bad news, I'd routinely say something like this: "You're lucky we caught it early, and it's good that it hasn't spread." I'm trying to be positive because I know how bad it could be if that cancer had spread. But when you're the patient, on the receiving end, those little words such as lucky and good take on a completely different meaning. No one is lucky to have cancer. No cancer is good to have. I also realized that I'm the doctor no woman wants to see. I'm fairly certain that everybody in my waiting room is imagining the worst. I know I was. Before I had cancer, I'd had several harmless breast cysts. And even though I knew they were cysts, a tiny part of my brain was telling me, shit, it's cancer. I'll be dead in a year. I now know why everyone looks so scared to see me. But there's another reason it was so much harder for me to cope. And that's because I knew too much. I didn't find out I had cancer in the normal way. I just thought it was another cyst. After all, I should know what a cancer feels like, shouldn't I? My mammogram was normal, and then they did an ultrasound, and the doctor put the probe on my breast, and I looked at the screen, and I knew. It was cancer. It was big. I'd need chemotherapy. I was going to lose my breast. Within seconds, I ran through all the worst-case scenarios, the risks of recurrence, the risks of death. I didn't need to Google breast cancer. It was all up here, and I couldn't cope. I wanted to run away and hide. I needed to be alone. My husband was sat next to me. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to call my parents. How could they possibly understand what I'm going through? They've never had cancer. How can they help me? But there's another reason I didn't want to talk to my family. I wanted to protect them from the horror story in my head. I knew what my future might hold. They didn't need to. But that was a hard burden for me to bear. And over the next couple of hours, I realized that I needed to talk about it. I had to talk about it. And somehow, we learned to cope with cancer together. But here's the thing. Cancer doesn't come with a rule book. There's no PDF to download, no app to install to tell you what to do, what to think, what to feel. Like most things in life, you have to make it up as you go along. Now, the next morning, my husband and I began the awful job of telling the rest of our friends and family. And the conversation went a little something like this. Hello. Hi, it's Liz. How are you? Good, thanks. How are you? Not so good. I've just found out I've got cancer and I start chemo in a week. Fuck. You get the picture. There was a lot of swearing. And then they'd cry, which made us cry all over again. And then they'd ask, how can we help? And I had no idea. I'd never had cancer before. And that's where my secret tribe came to the rescue. They were amazing. We'd all share the tips and tricks that helped us get through the dark days and nights ahead. And I became really close to 3 doctors who were having chemotherapy at the same time as me. But in the last couple of months, 2 of them have died. It's not fair. They were both younger than me, and I'd known them for less than a year. And it made me face my own mortality. Cancer is real. There are no guarantees. No one knows what the future holds. And that was brought home to me when I went to get the results of my surgery. I was expecting good news. My last scan had shown that the chemotherapy had worked and my cancer had almost disappeared. Instead, I got to hear my surgeon, who was also a close friend, tell me that not only was there 13 centimeters of cancer in my breast, it had spread to my lymph glands. And as a surgeon, I immediately knew what that meant. It meant more surgery. It meant radiotherapy. It meant my outlook wasn't quite as bright as before. It was the 23rd of December, 2015. Happy Christmas. The week that followed was one of the worst of my life. Not only did I have to plaster on a smile and get through Christmas Day without ruining it for my nieces and nephews, I also got to give my parents an extra Christmas present. Congratulations, your daughter's cancer has spread and she might die before you. What do you get me for Christmas? Well, my amazing husband gave me a week of being miserable. He allowed me to distance myself, lost in my thoughts, morbidly planning my funeral. And then he told me to pull myself together for both our sakes, and he was right. But that day was New Year's Eve, and I was not in the mood for celebrating. I just didn't see the point in carrying on. But cancer makes you look at life with fresh eyes, and I realized life is for living. And so I decided to keep a record of all the good things that were going to happen to me. And this is how I did it. It's my jar of joy. And just saying it makes me smile. And it's really simple. Every time something good happens to me, I write it on a card and I put it in the jar. Here's an example. My husband finally agreed to let our puppy sit on the sofa with me. That was a good thing. What would you write on that card? I want you all, now, to think of something good that's happened to you in the last couple of weeks. It doesn't need to be big. It could be as simple as finding out you've got a porn star name. What would you write on that card? Well, as luck would have it, in the back of your brochure this evening, there's an envelope with a card in it. And I wrote on mine before I came on stage. And mine says, "Not getting lost on the way to TEDx." I have a terrible sense of direction, even with a husband and an iPhone telling me where to go. And I'm going to put it in this. It's our jar of joy for this evening. I'm going to invite you all to write on your cards and put them in this jar, which you'll find near the entrance at the interval. Maybe we can read some out later this evening, although I have a sneaky feeling we might end up with 100 porn star names, but that's okay. I'm hoping you'll see the positive impact that a jar full of joy can bring, and maybe inspire you to start your own. For me, whenever I'm feeling sad or getting angry with my body for letting me down or planning my funeral again, it's a cancer thing, I go to the kitchen and I look at my jar of joy. See, I'm smiling again just saying it. And I take out a couple of cards and read them, and it brings me back to the present. It's how I help myself. But how do you help someone with cancer? It's really very simple. All we need is regular human contact. And it takes seconds. You just need to send a text, a tweet, a WhatsApp, however you communicate. And this is all you say. "Hi, just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking of you." That's it. Send it. Keep sending it. Send it once the initial shock has died down. Set an alarm on your phone to remind you if you have to. I do. You expect nothing in return. And you might not get a reply for a month, but that's okay. The person on the receiving end will be forever grateful, believe me. If you want to take it to the next level, send a card. We live in a digital age where we all communicate by emails. It's so quick and easy. But when was the last time you got a letter through the post that wasn't a bill? My mum's brother and sister live 400 miles away from me, and I hadn't seen them for years. But when they heard I had cancer, every week, without fail, they'd send me a card. It made me smile. It was wonderful to know they were thinking of me, even though they live so far away. It doesn't take much effort to help somebody. And so I'd like to think that if one day in the future you did get that phone call from a friend, that you would know how to help them. Your job is not to fix them. Your job is to simply be there for them, to let them know they're not alone, to tell them they don't need to suffer in silence, they don't need to hide the pain. It doesn't work. Most of all, your job is to help them smile, to help them value the good things in life, to help them create happy memories that they can put in their own jar of joy. Thank you.